Yeah.
Hi, Tom. What's your question for the Prime Minister?
It has been argued that we haven't seen anything yet in terms of cuts to public services. How intense will these be from a majority Conservative government?
Right. Well, what I'd say is that we have had to make difficult decisions, and a lot of those decisions I didn't want to have to make, but I became Prime Minister at a time when the economy was close to the brink, when our budget deficit was forecast actually to be higher than Greece's, and we had to make important decisions to get the deficit down, because a big deficit means higher taxes, it means higher mortgage rates, it means lost jobs, it means an economy in chaos, and I wanted to stop that. Now, what we've done so far has got the deficit down by half, as I was saying to Jeremy. What we need to do in the next 2 years is basically similar to what we've done so far. We've got to find £1 out of every 100 the government spends and save that rather than putting up people's taxes. So if you think of the department spending changes, it's similar to what we've had to do in previous years, and similarly for welfare. It is achievable. I wouldn't stand here and say that if I didn't believe that. I really want to do this without putting up taxes on hard-working people, because you don't tax your way to growth, you don't tax your way to jobs. So what we're suggesting is manageable, it's doable, it will require efficiencies, but we can also make important commitments, like saying the NHS is special, that will get extra money every year.
In the Chancellor's autumn statement, which for some reason happened in December, Mr Osborne announced that
by 2019-20, Britain is now predicted to have a surplus of £23 billion.
There seemed to be near universal acknowledgement that this plan to achieve a surplus, and to do so without raising taxes, would involve big reductions in government spending. Really big ones.
Massive, dramatic, devastating.
But then, this week, David Cameron said something that made those warnings seem completely misplaced.
It means reducing overall government spending by just 1% each year. Put another way, we have to spend £1 a year in every £100 that government spends. Now, I don't think there is a family or a business that couldn't do that. And I don't think that government, seeing as it is your money, should be any different.
Just what's going on here? Would the proposed cuts to government spending be huge, or just 1%, as the Prime Minister said there? I asked Gemma Tetlow from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, an independent economic research institute, to explain.
David Cameron is right to say that over the next Parliament, the Coalition's plans imply that total spending will be cut by about 1% a year over the 4 years from 2015 to 2019.
OK, so it's true, but then how does that square with what we hear about enormous cuts that are planned?
Even though total spending is only being cut by 1% a year, within that there are parts of spending that are actually growing much more quickly over the next Parliament, which means that there are some other areas that are going to have to be cut by much more in order to reach that total of only a 1% cut.
So we've got a cut of 1% a year, but that's to overall spending. So when you just look at the areas that are not protected, what do the planned cuts look like each year?
Total spending is going to be cut by 1% a year, but once you take account of the fact that debt interest will be growing, spending on the NHS isn't going to be cut, spending on schools and overseas aid may well not be cut either, pension spending is going up, as are other areas of social security spending. That means that the unprotected areas of public service spending, that includes things like policing, the Home Office, courts, areas of local government spending, such as social care, would need to be cut by about 6% a year over the next Parliament.
And then when you add it up over the entire Parliament, what are the cuts by the end of that Parliament?
So 6% a year for 4 years means that by the end of the Parliament, those areas will be cut by 26% compared to their 2015 level. OK, so that is, I think it's fair to say that's not a small cut. That is not a small cut to spending, and it comes on top of significant cuts to those same areas of spending over this Parliament. So it will not be easy to deliver. So taking into account cuts since 2010 then, when David Cameron became Prime Minister, what are the total cuts scheduled over the life of both Parliaments? So comparing what these budgets would be in 2019 with where they were in 2010, they'll be about 41% lower than they were. OK, so that's not 41% on all government spending, that's 41% of the departments that are unprotected. So comparing these unprotected departments, if the next government were to continue the sorts of protection that we've seen in this Parliament, that would mean those unprotected departments' budgets being 41% lower by 2019 than they were.
Gemma Tetlow from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, explaining how the Conservatives' budget-cutting plans would feel tougher than David Cameron would like you to think. All those numbers, by the way, were adjusted to remove the effects of inflation. I'm reminded of the American humorist P.J. O'Rourke's explanation about how to eliminate the US budget deficit in the early 1990s. He made it look so easy. And never forget O'Rourke's circumcision precept. You can take 10% off the top of anything. That said, Gemma Tetlow's talking about many government department budgets enduring total cuts of 41% across the decade. It sounds like there are certain areas where that kind of cut really would bring tears to your eyes.
I've been